Okay, it's great to be back. Let's jump back into Matthew chapter 16. Jesus has just told the disciples, apparently for the very first time, that he's going to go to Jerusalem, be mistreated by the spiritual leaders. They're going to kill him, and he'll be raised up on the third day. They didn't pay much attention to that raised up on the third day thing. What a shock. What an absolute shock. So Peter takes Jesus aside and rebukes him. Matthew says he rebukes Jesus, and he says, "God forbid it, Lord." That's such a funny thing to think that someone's rebuking the Lord and saying, "God forbid it," and he's actually talking to God in the flesh. "God forbid it, Lord." I mean, it just shows Peter really didn't have a full grasp. 6 verses earlier, he had said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God," and Jesus said, "You're blessed. God the Father revealed this to you." But now Peter is completely off kilter, doesn't have the revelation that it would be good if he would have had it, and he's actually wishing something that is completely opposed to the purpose of God. And more so than that, completely opposed to the whole purpose for which Jesus had come. And more than that, completely opposed to the ancient eternal plan of God, which he formed before the foundation of the world. And so when you go against God's eternal plan that he's had in his mind from the foundation of the world, you are probably not right. Okay? And Peter was not right. And Jesus reacted rather sternly. Verse number 23, "But he turned and said to Peter, 'Get behind me, Satan.'" It's the same guy. 6 verses ago, he said, "Blessed are you, flesh and blood is not revealed to you, but my Father who is in heaven." Now he's saying, "Get behind me, Satan." Now, is that perhaps a metaphorical expression, or are we to interpret that Jesus believed that Peter literally had turned into Satan? I'm going to let you decide this one because you've been my student for so long. Please help me out here. Tell me, is that literal or symbolic? You're correct. Thank you. It's not literal. Peter did not turn into the devil. Jesus was just saying it because he wanted to let Peter know, and the other disciples, your statement is so wrong. It's not just wrong based upon the fact that it's a little off kilter, it's a human conjecture. No, that's an idea that could have its source from Satan himself. It's so wrong. It couldn't be more wrong than it is, Peter, and I want you to never forget this. You are, he said in verse number 23, a stumbling block to me. Because we know that there was an inclination of Jesus naturally. He was 100% man, 100% God, but naturally there was an inclination in him to a natural desire not to want to suffer and die, to be scourged, to be spit upon, to have his beard ripped out, to be nailed to a cross and paled there and hang there for hours and slowly, suffer a cruel, excruciating death. Jesus was not relishing that whole idea. He had obviously thought about it prior to this. He knew he was born for that. When he got closer to the time, just anticipating it, as he was praying, the Bible says he was sweating drops of blood, a medical condition, I understand, that only occurs when people are under severe stress. Jesus prayed, "If possible, let this cup pass from me." Okay, so here, Peter is making a suggestion that Jesus says it's so wrong it could be considered satanic, and you're a stumbling block to me. It's actually presenting an idea that I don't even want to entertain. And then he goes on in verse number 23, "For you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's." Whew. Whoa. We could stop right now and just sit here in silence to the end of our time together and ponder that. It is so weighty. But the main thing is that there isn't any doubt that Jesus' death was not a cruel accident of fate. as if it just happened and God was up in heaven biting his nails saying, oh, I wish this had never turned out so badly. No, it was predestined. For this, Jesus had been born. It was the plan of God. And in his own human sympathy, naturally, who can find fault with Peter? Had I been there, I'm sure I would have reacted the same way as him had I not known what I know now and what you, of course, know now as well. But he made it so plain. Those guys understood when he set his face like flint to go to Jerusalem, where surely they knew trouble was brewing, even apart from the fact of what Jesus said was going to happen, because they knew the situation and how the leaders were looking for Jesus and wanting to kill him and so forth. They knew, we're not going to persuade Jesus otherwise. We're going to Jerusalem. They also recognized, that if something didn't happen, their own lives were in jeopardy because they were a band of brothers. And some of them were expecting that when Jesus went to Jerusalem, that because the situation was going to be so tense there, and unless something miraculous happened, Jesus was bound to be bound, captured, and killed. Because the religious leaders were out to get him. Some assumed that Jesus was going to Jerusalem, and that's when he was going to set up his kingdom. That finally the anointed Messiah, whom the Old Testament scriptures had foretold that he would reign over all the earth, finally we're going to see Jesus ruling and reigning. In fact, one of the mothers of the disciples asked if her sons could sit on his right hand and left hand, because they were all anticipating it's not going to be like we think. Jesus is going to rule and reign. He's not going to be hurt. He can't be killed. He's the Messiah. Messiah doesn't die. They thought it all figured out. But like us, when we think we have it figured out, we often don't. Okay? Well, Jesus thought this was an appropriate time to tell these guys that sometimes the going is tough. It's not easy to obey God all the time. And he says something that applies to all of us. We need to take heed to it. Can't wait to talk with you about that. I'll see you next time.
HeavenWord 7 is made possible by the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.